You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place. Hello and welcome to Arcane Carolinas. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw.
I'm your co-host, award-winning novelist, Michael G. Williams.
And we definitely have not been marathon recording these all in a row several months before you hear them.
It's definitely not early June for me.
So today's story, I did not do a big history on the county. We haven't done that in a while. I feel like I dropped the ball on that.
Well, so did I. Don't worry about it.
Well, today's story comes out of Durham, North Carolina, a town with which we are both intimately familiar.
Yeah, it's in fact where I live.
I have very fond memories as a child going to the old Durham Bulls Stadium, which is still there.
Yeah, the Durham Ballpark.
Yeah, that's where they filmed Bull Durham there.
Yeah, it's where North Carolina Central University and a bunch of local high schools and some other local colleges play baseball. And every now and then, if you go to King's Sandwich Shop, which is right across the street, and you have yourself some lunch, then you can watch some people play baseball or practice baseball. There's all kinds of cool stuff that happens there.
That said, the new Durham Bulls Stadium is like an amusement park. It is so cool.
It's very, very nice. I don't like sports, and I think it's really, really nice.
There's lots to do there in addition to watching baseball. They have a giant play area. Actually, you know what? I haven't been there this year. I have no idea who the sponsor is this year. Romper room thing for the kids. They do promotion nights. They do like a Marvel night where there's superheroes walking around. They do a state fair night, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I got a giant foam finger from Big Sweet Potato, the sweet potato lobby.
Did you know North Carolina is responsible for over 50% of sweet potato production in the United States?
I learned that night.
There you go.
I got a big foam finger that says North Carolina sweet potatoes. What else do they do there? Lots of good food, lots of good drink. It's just a good time. So get out to support your local minor league team if you're in Durham and check out the Bulls. Speaking of Bulls, Pizzeria Toro is one of my favorite places in Durham.
It's very, very good pizza. There's a lot of really good pizza in Durham, actually.
There is.
There's Pompieri Pizza. There's Pizza del Toro. There's all kinds of good stuff.
And there's a bar that you introduced me to that I am not going to steal talking about because you introduced me to it, but it's awesome. And you should mention it.
Oh, it's so lovely. It's called Arcana, Arcana. Arcana is a tarot-themed bar, but it's also kind of a speakeasy-themed bar, and it's below street level, so it's kind of got this like underground speakeasy feel. You have to descend a long stairway to get into it, although it is, as I understand it, handicapped accessible via an elevator in the back. I'm not sure. And it is just a beautiful space. They managed to weather our current predicament, and here they are. It's a gorgeous furniture, really amazing cocktails, like super good, like house recipe cocktails, custom cocktails, and they'll make anything that you can ask for. Plus a lot of non-alcoholic cocktails and just like, regular sodas and waters and teas and things like that. It's an amazingly fun space. They do some live music. They do live readings. They do performances. They do dance parties. They do just quiet nights listening to music. It is a fun, great place.
Yes, check it out. So I didn't do the history of the county, but we did plug local businesses. Durham, North Carolina.
There you go.
Today's topic is J.B. Rhine and the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory.
I'm fascinated to hear about this because I have personal experience of that space, but I don't know anything about its history. So I am delighted to hear it.
So before we begin, you might be asking yourself, why do we care about the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory? Because it has impacted so much of modern perception of weird. And full disclosure, it's not at Duke anymore. They got kicked out. We'll get to that. There's a lot of twists in this one. So it's gonna be a little academic today, but it's gonna be fun.
Oh, sounds great.
So Joseph Banks Rhine, or JB as he went by, was born on September 29th, 1895, not in North Carolina, but in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
The second of 5 children, so middle kid, lives in Pennsylvania till his early teens when his family relocates to Ohio. After high school, he attended Ohio Northern University for 2 years and then went to the College of Worcester, where, from what I could gather, is where he meets his wife, sometimes referred to as the first lady of parapsychology, Louisa E. Rhine. She went by Louie, so going forward, I'll refer to her as Louie.
Sure.
She was a little bit older than him. She was born the oldest of 9 children in 1891 in Ohio. So she was a native Ohioan, if that's the term.
I believe it is, yes.
They both studied botany. So they were in the same program in college, which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
I have a natural resource science background with, took some botany classes and stuff. So I was like, hey, kindred spirit. So they in more ways than one, as we'll get to.
Oh, there we go.
So after college, JB enlists in the Marine Corps and gets stationed in Santiago, Chile, which I always feel weird saying Chile because I always said it just Chile. So I'm trying to say it the correct way.
I greatly appreciate that. It always drives me a little crazy when people mispronounce the names of places, although I do it myself.
So after his enlistment's up, he does a short stint, and him and Louis both wind up enrolled at the University of Chicago, where they both received master's degrees and PhDs in botany.
Wow.
So they were like married study buddies.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, so they went through the same program, lots of shared experiences and scientific background, and both super smart. So the Rhines deserve a spotlight.
Definitely, especially given that she was getting a PhD at a time when it was exceptionally uncommon for women to be even admitted into PhD programs. Good on her. She's a real trailblazer.
She is. She puts in a lot of work, which we'll acknowledge as we go on. While they're attending school, there's a guest lecture by Arthur Conan Doyle in May of 1922.
As in the Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur
Yes.
Conan Doyle.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm really getting interested because he had a lot of very interesting beliefs.
So he is exalting scientific proof of communication with the dead.
Yes. This is like his favorite soapbox. Okay.
Yes. JB later wrote about attending that lecture about the experience, quote, "This mere possibility was the most exhilarating thought I had had in years." So the Rhines go together, attend this lecture, and JB is like, "This is it. This this is what we need to do."
He has a real big "I want to believe" moment.
Yes. So they wrap up their degrees, they get their PhDs, and they remain in academia. They accept research and instructional positions for 1 year, both of them. They were like a package deal, like their whole life, like after they met, they were like a package deal and did everything together.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Oh, very cool. And, these days that model gets followed at a lot of institutions where if one member of a couple gets hired on as faculty, then the other member of the couple will either get hired on at an associated institution or at the same institution. They'll figure out a way to keep people together so that they can sort of keep supporting each other's work.
That happened to a colleague of ours.
Yeah.
That had not even occurred to me until you just said that. I'm like, we know that guy.
Yeah, totally.
That they did that. Cool. So they remain in academia. They accept research and instructional positions for 1 year at the Boyce Institute of Plant Research in Yonkers, New York.
Okay. That's a very descriptive name.
They apparently didn't work out. They only made it 1 year. And then they moved to Morgantown, West Virginia, where they both taught at WVU. Have you ever been to Morgantown?
I have driven past it. I've never been into it, except that I, went into the parking lot of a Target or something like that to grab something on my way through.
It's a cool town, and it does have like a lot of parts of West Virginia, that old feeling, like it's kind of spooky and old, and like, I don't know, it's cool. So it's a good place for them.
Yeah.
For what they are actually interested in. They're practicing botany, but what they really want to do is get into parapsychology. And their time there was actually spent, they were sort of moonlighting, trying to figure out how to do academic pursuit of parapsychology.
Really?
Yeah. They find a guy, Dr. Walter Franklin Prince of the Boston Society of Psychic Research, and he hires them away. So that's their in to the field as professionals. So I should also mention that was in 1926, and mediumship and general occultism is like all the rage, and the scene is absolutely rife with frauds and charlatans and just general douchebaggery.
Yeah.
It's kind of like today. Actually,
there are a lot of people who claim that they're, feeling spirits, etc.
Right. So a lot of people have their hands in each other's pockets and are working together, where somebody with a good reputation will vouch for someone else for the mutual benefit of shining a spotlight on themselves as the keeper of some hidden truth. Just making sure that everybody knows they're the special people kind of thing. So it's 1926, and one such person that I just described is someone named Mina Crandon. So Mina is the toast of the town in Boston, where she lives and where the Rhines have relocated to work with this society. She's said to be very attractive, the wife of a respected surgeon, and someone that would hold absolutely over-the-top seances in dimly lit rooms involving booze, a lot of sexual tension, and titillation of the attendees.
Really?
Yes. So, that all sounds fun, I guess, but she was just totally full of it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, she'd be like, and now I have to take off all my clothes.
So kind of a spiritual ancestor, no pun intended, to, you think of like a 1960s guru.
Yeah, kind of. So there's a lot of stuff that I could not include because I know that we have some young listeners.
Right.
This was not a good scene.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that the comparison I'm drawing is to the sort of stereotype of a self-proclaimed guru who is looking to take advantage of people.
Yeah, it was not good. So her husband's in on it. She's in on it. The Rhines are referred to attend one of these seances. They're like, oh, you have to see Mina. The great Mina. Right. You have to go. And they went. JB did not drink. So they kept trying to ply him with substance. And he's like, no, I'm good, man. I'm just here for the weird academic researcher trying to observe some stuff for my work.
No thanks. I'll take another cup of coffee.
Right. So JB and Louis both attend, and they observe a lot of shenanigans and described it as a performance in 7 acts.
Ooh.
JB wrote a report documenting fraudulent methods.
This is what happens when you invite scientists to your very complicated scam.
He submits it to the American Society for Psychical Research, and they sit on it.
Really?
They stomp it down so that it won't come out. So he takes it somewhere else, which is generally frowned upon, to like shop your academic papers.
Yeah.
Until you've received a rejection, you're supposed to assume that the journal that you submitted it to is still reviewing it. He did not wait because he felt so strongly that he was really big on outing frauds. This is why I said he's a bit of a kindred spirit of mine. Like, I was like, yeah, man, you get it, plant man. Because the thing is, he wants to believe. You know what I mean? Like, he wants, prove it to me, show it to me. I want this to be real.
Right.
So he takes it, and it does get published in the Journal of Abnormal Social Psychology in 1927.
Great. Good on him.
In response, it gets a big response in the scene. Many people come to defend Mina.
Of course.
Because they like to drink at her house and look at her naked body.
Yeah, they might get to sit a little closer next time.
Right. Arthur Conan Doyle goes as far as publishing an article in a Boston newspaper stating, and I quote, J.B. Rhine is an ass.
Oh my gosh.
Which is great. So the Rhines are having a rough go of things. The expose just burns their relationship with the Boston Society of Psychic Research to the ground.
Doesn't sound like they missed out on much.
No, Ryan JB publicly states that he is really confused as to why they had been going along with the ruses for as long as they had. And there was speculation of a mutually beneficial financial component.
No way.
Yeah, funny. Like, I love this about him. He's not trying to be a downer. He just wants to see if you can prove that something's real. And like, sure, sometimes a spooky story is just a spooky story, but that's only okay if you're not presenting it as fact.
Yeah. If you're a scientist, and here we have two scientists married to each other in mutual pursuit of something that they want as verifiable fact, reproducible results.
Right. And they're not representing things fraudulently for their own personal gain.
Yeah.
So I really like the Rhines.
Yeah, these people sound really impressive. Had somebody said to me, draw a character sketch of the person who probably established this research center, I would not have had this as my character sketch.
So yeah, it's good stuff. It's a very rough year for the Rhines. JB's mother dies. They're on the outs in the Boston paranormal psychic crowd, and that's where they lived. They didn't really know what was going to come next when someone named John Thomas gets in touch with JB. So John Thomas had lost his wife 2 months prior to getting in touch with the Rhines, and like really missed her and was not coping well. And like I said, mediumship was a big thing at the time. And he was said to be a very grounded man that later said it was an act of desperation to consult with a medium. And he went to a medium named Minnie Soule. And Minnie's approach was kind of the opposite of what I described from Mina. It was almost clinical, like clinical professionalism, very well lit. You come in, she does her thing. You guys talk, she does her thing. Done. Like that's it. It's not naked parties with booze,
right?
Which again, it's a thing.
There's nothing wrong with those.
It's right. That's what I guess what I'm trying to say is like, if that's what people want to do, like I'm good with it, but
yeah,
don't make it something that it's not.
Yeah. Have a great time. Just don't rob people in the course of it.
Right. So what shocks John is that he goes in skeptical. The medium communicated what he later reported as a staggering 62 accurate details regarding his deceased wife.
Wow.
He apparently went in with a notebook because he was like very it was an act of desperation and he wanted to like fact check him, keep himself in check.
Much like a true believer who goes in looking for reasons to believe, a true skeptic, and by true skeptic, I mean somebody whose faith is skepticism. They're going to go in looking for reasons to discredit.
Right. Here's the thing. She used words that the wife used, phrasing, humor, everything matched his deceased wife in the communication. And it kind of freaked him out. So he immediately contacts someone at the psychology department for Harvard University, William McDougall, said, something real happened here. I cannot explain this. Help me understand this. I'm going to take a trip now to England for, he already had a trip planned. So while I'm there, I'm going to consult with a different medium, someone that could not have possibly seen that my wife was deceased in the newspaper, could not possibly know anything about me. And the results recurred.
Interesting.
Yes. So by the time he's back, he hears back from Dr. McDougall. And Dr. McDougall says, you need to talk to this guy, J.B. Rhine. He provides critical examination of unexplainable phenomena. And coincidentally, McDougall had also just taken a position at Durham's own Duke University.
No way.
He was the head of the psychology department. So in the time between, he gets the letter when he's at Harvard. He's like, all right, cool. Dude goes to England. By the time he's back, McDougall's at Duke and says, you know what? I'm going to hire the Rhines and we're going to make a program out of this.
All right.
So they put it under the umbrella of abnormal psychology.
Okay.
And it just sounds so much more fun than the abnormal psych classes that I took.
Yeah, for real. Definitely.
In undergrad. So the Rhines accept the job. They meet with John Thomas and he becomes their first proper lab rat. So they're like, all right, this is our guy. And I say that he was the lab rat because in working with Thomas and reviewing the information from the mediums, traveling to different locations to talk to the mediums, to visit his wife's tombstone, Rhine went all over the country verifying the facts that Thomas brought him. He knew that it was more than a few good guesses. He did not believe that it was fraud, but he couldn't verifiably confirm that anyone had actually communicated as vessels for the deceased. So he started thinking, well, what's the common factor here? It's John. what if what is actually happening is John is projecting psychically using telekinesis or telepathy or ESP, whatever term. These terms didn't exist at the time.
Right.
So a lot of things get used interchangeably in the documentation.
Okay.
Basically, his theory was, okay, I'm never going to be able to prove that the medium was a vessel for the dead. But what I can try to prove is whether or not a living individual is able to either project or receive information using like a sixth sense.
Yeah. If you've ever watched the show Twin Peaks, there's a scene early on when a person who thinks they have seen the killer in the big mystery that is central to the show is going to have a police sketch done of that. And one of the other characters declines to be present when that police sketch is being done. And that character is himself something of a mystic. And when asked why he doesn't want to be there because it's central to the investigation that he's conducting, he just says, I'm a strong sender. And it's like played as kind of a joke, like
right.
Everybody else is like, oh, this guy's so weird. But that's what he's talking about.
Exactly. So Rhine's whole thing now is like, cool, I have a ready and willing test subject. I have an interesting story to chase down. I need to develop reasonably sound tests to attempt to prove the possibility of telepathy or extrasensory perception. McDougal is on board. He greenlights all the work. He gives him a lab and staff and says, all right, go nuts. Here's your funding.
Can you imagine being a grad student back then who's just like, I'm going to be doing what?
Right. So the Duke Parapsychology Lab is like off and running. In 1928, she had been active in all of this up until this time. They were very much a team. She took a reduced role in 1928 to take care of children for the next few years, remaining an integral part of the lab and later coming back full time. But she did take a few years off as the children were very small.
Sure.
In an effort to make things as simple as possible in creating these like reasonably sound tests, they experimented with dice, which is fun, influencing dice. Developed the famous Zener cards, which we included in the first issue of AC Quarterly. We made little DIY Zener cards. Psychologist Carl Zener and JB worked together to make these cards. And if you've ever seen Ghostbusters, the original from 1984, the scene in the beginning where Venkman is running an experiment with the students with the wavy lines, a circle, across a square, those are the cards we're talking about. And they kind of became a pop culture phenomenon. They blew up.
Good on them. This is amazing.
The cards were sold in stores. Apparently one of the early batches was bad. The paper was too thin and you could see through them. So that was a big thing. So they were, they were experimenting and they were trying to come up with methods, but they ran into some walls in the public eye. There was even a televised thing. There was like see if you can communicate over the, psychically through TV.
No way.
And like guess the cards and stuff. Lots of fun. But here's the downside to that. When you achieve that level of visibility, everybody wants a piece of you, whether or not it's appropriate. And letters just poured into the lab from the general public. Things of, I saw a flying saucer. Can you help me explain it? I see ghosts. I need you to help me explain it. I have ESP. Help me prove it, for my own benefit.
Right.
and
my name is Mina and I'd like you to help me enhance my parties.
Right. And then desperate people, victims, either primary or secondary of crimes, reaching out and being like, can you link me up with a psychic that can help me? And like, they basically became just like inundated with all this stuff. And they were like, well, this isn't central to our research. And they were cool about it. I have a rain barrel that keeps filling itself. Funny how that's
pretty useful.
Right. Lots of weird stuff. And they would, polite. In some cases, they would assist where appropriate, but it wasn't central to the research. It was more like secondary stuff that they just collated, and sometimes students would assist. So in 1940, JB co-authors with a person named Joseph Gaither Pratt, Extrasensory Perception After 60 Years, a review of all experimental studies to date of clairvoyance and telepathy. That work is recognized now as the first instance of meta-analysis in the history of science.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang.
They just took every study, right? Like, and they just brought all the data together. And unfortunately, They left Duke in 1960 when the lab lost its funding.
Oh, well.
That's a good run, though.
That's really great. I would imagine that their faculty department chair might have retired around then. Maybe they were losing their protection from other professors who were saying, you're studying what?
Right. So they leave Duke in the 60s. And I'll get to those other professors in a moment, because that is a component of this. And in the interest of being transparent, I do want to acknowledge one or two things at the end.
Sure.
He says, not thrilled about them.
Yeah.
So they leave Duke in the 60s. JB is credited with founding institutions that are necessary for the continuing research into parapsychology, including he established the Journal of Parapsychology, which is still going.
Yeah.
The formation of the Parapsychological Association and the Foundation for Research on the Nature of Man. That is a precursor to what you mentioned that you were aware of in Durham, which is now known as the Rhine Research Center.
Cool.
And we will talk about them in a second. But it is worth noting, and I said I would do this, after decades of work, the Rhines believed that they were able to conclusively determine that there are instances, although rare, in which human beings are able to leverage what can best be described as a sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
It would be irresponsible to ignore claims of procedural errors in their experiments, and that results have not been replicated with experiments conducted in other laboratories.
Okay, well, remember that thing that we talked about at the beginning of reproducible results.
So that, I am willing to say that those people attempting to reproduce their results probably have not leapt in with the same fervor or focused dedication, investing decades into it. I think they've probably done, experiments here and there and been like, oh, it didn't work out. And I think it's also important to note that the point the Rhines made were that it was exceptionally rare.
Yeah. Once something is very, very rare, it's going to be very difficult to reliably reproduce.
And they did make it a point to debunk people and test very strongly. One example, there was a mother and daughter that supposedly had a link that they could communicate. And they realized that even though they weren't moving their hands or feet or touching each other or giving each other signals, as soon as they put them in separate rooms, it wouldn't work. And they had been using facial cues.
Very nice detection work.
Stuff like that. So they did out people that came to them and were like, we have this special ability. And they were like, cool, let's test it. And most of the times people would be like, yes. And then they'd get, outed. So I guess I'm saying that to give credence to their methods to some degree. And I'm not discounting that there were procedural errors at different times, but weird stuff happens. And I'm not willing to write that off.
No, especially something for which we have zero understanding, to the point that ask anybody who believes in it and you're going to get different answers as to why it would occur in the first place. So that makes it very difficult to test, and it makes it very difficult to control for the factors that might be influencing it one way or another. In science, people need to be able to control for the known factors in order to measure whatever they're trying to determine, because it's not yet known. And that's not possible in a phenomenon like this when it's so rare and you just don't know what the unknown factors are.
I mean, that is science. Mess around and find out. Experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes, maybe your experiments are just the best idea at the time. Maybe they contribute to a larger discovery later. Maybe they don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's research. Not every experiment is going to yield these earth-shattering results. So anyway, I like the Rhines. I'm in. I'm in on the Rhines.
Yeah, I wholly endorse the effort that they put into this and the expertise that they brought to it.
If you want more info on the life of Rhine, there's a book that I read called Unbelievable by Stacy Horn. It's all about the Rhines, ESP, telekinesis, and all the stuff that we talked about. It goes way in depth on the history of the lab and their experiments. It's very fair. It examines the topic critically, but with an open mind. It was on the New York Times bestseller list probably 10 years ago. Paperback, it's cheap. But yeah, it's a decent book. So yes, the legacy of the Rhines lives on the fringes of academia.
I think technically it might be just beyond the city limits.
Yes. Yes. In paranormal research and pop culture, but also in the Rhine Research Center, where they offer classes and continue experiments in ESP research, mind matter interaction, and something they call bioenergy research. And they also continue the production of the Journal of Parapsychology. And they have groups that get together to explore related topics and share experiences. You can find them online at rhineonline.org. Sorry, I just laughed a little bit. Rhine Online.
Well, we're going to link to that in the show notes for sure.
No.
Is now a good time for me to share my experience of going to the Rhine Research Center?
Yeah.
So the methods by which I found out about this are circuitous, and I'll skip them. But I eventually, probably 10 years ago, was put in touch with someone who was at the time conducting hypnosis sessions at the Rhine Research Center. He was a licensed, certified hypnotist. He did, hypnotism for things like people who want hypnotism to help them quit smoking, things like that. That sort of behavioral modification hypnotism. And he had training in psychology and, all the foundational scientific certification that you would want from somebody you're going to let tinker inside your subconscious mind.
It's no Mina. He's no Mina.
He's no Mina. So it was a very above board and very clinical. But eventually I found out that was somebody I could make an appointment with for a past life regression. Now, at the time, I had listened to a couple of other shows that were in production then where a host or both hosts had done past life regressions and recorded them. And I thought that was interesting. And I also felt like as long as I came away from it with a recording of what I said and what he said, then I wouldn't really have to worry about the possibility that he was going to, make me, I don't know, bark like a dog every third Thursday, something like that. The sort of stereotypical fears that people have of hypnotism.
Right.
So I wasn't really concerned about that because I was going to have a record of what had happened. And it wasn't going to be a record that he gave me. He was going to give me a record he produced, and I was also going to produce my own record. And, I could compare them if I needed to. So I somewhat paranoidly did all of that sort of groundwork ahead of time. And then I made an appointment and I went. He was a super nice guy. He was an older gentleman in a shirt and tie. He led me to a room that was not unlike, a dentist's examining room or a doctor's examining room. There was a recliner there, and he sat in an office chair and, made sure that things were quiet and introduced me to the other staff on the way in and then conducted hypnosis. Now, I had never been hypnotized. And so I went into it saying, it's possible that I'll be one of those people who resists hypnotism. That was not the case. And in fact, I went in a little faster than I would have expected of myself and had a really fascinating experience. He guided me very gently through, basically choosing a past life to examine and then talking my way through different aspects of it. And it started with, you'll see your past lives arrayed in front of you like sort of a bank of television screens. Let yourself focus on one. Don't try too hard to focus on, to choose one. Just sort of let one of them come to you. And then he had me start by describing what was on my feet, if anything. What was I wearing in terms of dress, things like that, and then worked me up to sort of this narrative of that person's life. The narrative that came out of it, and I say narrative because I'm not totally sure that I believe that it was real, is I was the son of a sheep farmer in England, and my father had just died, and I was about to inherit the farm, and I was really upset about this because I didn't feel prepared. And then he walked me through the rest of this person's life and what his likes were. And it turns out that he really liked books. He was really proud of his library of 10 books. And, and he was educated and literate. And then walked me through, what were his favorite foods? What was his favorite meal? Things like that. And then sort of had me go through this process of saying goodbye to that life and saying goodbye to each person who was significant in it, and then coming back to who I am now. I'm not totally sure that I believe in past lives, so I'm not totally sure that I believe that reflected truth historically, but I was able to verify that somebody with that name lived in that town at that time.
What?
And I was able to verify that that person owned a farm, and I was able to verify a lot of the weird little stuff from it. And so I don't consider it evidence in that I can't like produce a hard copy and enter it in court. But for me, it was a very emotionally significant experience. And I came away from it feeling like I understood something about that person's life and the ways that that person's narrative influenced my own perspectives and my own experiences. And maybe all he was doing was like pulling out part of my own psychology and letting me get some distance from it and project onto it and understand something about myself that I couldn't confront if it were about me talking about me. So that's possible. But it was meaningful emotionally and psychologically in a way that was really deep for me and led to some pretty significant shifts in my perspectives on some things.
That is wild. So sorry, we have never discussed this.
Yeah, I very rarely talk about this experience.
So I have some questions.
You go for it.
And they're not meant to be disrespectful.
No, I will not be offended by any of them.
When you came out of it, did you remember what you had talked about, or did you get
Absolutely.
all that information from okay, so it wasn't, you didn't have to like go back to review the recording to get it.
No, I remember what the interior of his house looked like. I remember what the boots looked like that I was wearing in the first moments of it.
Wow.
Yeah, it felt like memory.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's that's a good way of putting it. Crazy. Yeah, they do not offer that anymore. If they do, it's not on their website.
Yeah, he was somebody who it turned out was only basically there sort of as a temporary research person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I happened to hit it in the right window.
Cool. RhineOnline.org.
It was a really, really fascinating experience. And I think that if you ever have the opportunity to do something like that and you feel safe and comfortable doing so, and you trust the person who would guide you through it, then it's worth a shot.
Well, that's pretty much it. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Now I'm like, we should have just done a full episode on that.
No, that was weird. It was weird. There was a lot in that life that I do not want in this life, but I understand why I don't want it in this life.
Well, while you're in this life, be sure to check out arcanecarolinas.com where you can get to our social media.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're interested in those sorts of research institutes, I think it is worth noting, first of all, that there is an organization known now as SRI International. It's a nonprofit scientific research institute. They're in California. Originally, it was called the Stanford Research Institute. They research a lot of the same things. They do so very actively now. They do remote viewing research and telekinesis and psychokinesis and telepathy and ESP and all sorts of things. They're really interesting to check out. One of their former researchers wrote a really fascinating book about 10 years ago. And another interesting thing that it just reminds me of the sort of research that it sounds like the Rhines are doing. There's a research project going on right now that's been going on since the late 90s called the Global Consciousness Project. What they do is they have what are described as hardware random number generators. As far as I can tell, they're basically, lotto cages, and they just constantly generate sequences. And what they're looking for is if anything really significant happens in an area or worldwide, will it cause unexpected perturbations in the results of those random number generators locally to something that's more local or globally for some big event. They've not been able to conclusively prove anything, but there has been interesting anecdata from them, if you'll let me make up that term, such as on 9/11, supposedly a bunch of those random number generators produced unexpectedly non-random sequences of numbers.
Huh. This sounds very Rhine-esque.
Exactly. It's this sort of, it's an attempt to sort of see, does the larger, massive, the collective unconscious affect the physical world in some way that could be measured?
To that end, if you've seen us live, that's why we do our Goofy Zener card experiment live.
Yeah.
Want to see if there's a collective consciousness thing going on. Thanks for checking us out. I joke, but also, yes, please do follow us on social media. That's where you'll find the latest information on upcoming live appearances, as well as interact with us. Leave us a rating if you like it on Apple Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.